So the formal title given for my today's lecture is on preparedness, capacity building, and prevention. So I will try to continue yesterday's discussion and start with the first PPT. All right. Yesterday, one PPT which in hurry we could not discuss is the Conference of Paris. Now, this is a global group which addresses issues related to climate change. And this is in form of an agreement which was adopted by 196 parties of Conference of Parties in Paris on 12 December 2015 and entered into the force on 4th November 2016, next year. Its goal is to limit global warming. Global warming is a phenomena we are not going to discuss here, but that is going to affect the global temperature, ambient temperature, which is seriously affecting the climate, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. And to achieve this long-term temperature goal, actually this temperature goal is like a final title, but it actually encompasses a lot of activities related with greenhouse effect, emissions, fuel use. The countries aim to reach global peaking of greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible to achieve a climate neutral world by mid-century. That means climate neutral means the emissions and the lifestyle does not lead to any effect on climate because of greenhouse effect, things like that. The Paris Agreement is a landmark. It's a big decision. So this yesterday we could not discuss. I just wanted to relate because climate has a big role to play in disasters, hazards, and subsequently the disaster management. Next. So yesterday we also discussed, yesterday we discussed a lot of terminologies used in the disaster and disaster management. We discussed disaster risk, hazard, exposure, vulnerability, capacity and coping capacity, probability of any incident, hazard occurring, impact, that is damage and losses to the community, economic losses, micro, macro and mesoeconomy, direct and indirect economic losses, and the international efforts in the direction of disaster, that is Yokohama, Yogyo, and the Sendai framework, which is the present framework. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we will discuss some more topics related to disaster and disaster management, that is more with capacity building, prevention and preparedness, and some more related subjects. Let us say we touch the subject, we open the subject, preparedness. The knowledge and capacity is developed by governments, response and recovery organizations, communities, and individuals to effectively anticipate, respond to recover from the impacts of likely imminent or current disasters. So this becomes the basic for preparedness, and the prepared action is carried out within the context of disaster risk management, and aims to build the capacities needed to effectively manage all types of emergencies and achieve orderly transitions from response to sustained recovery. Important is transitions from response to sustained recovery. A recovery which is sustainable and which is done in an orderly manner. A transition from once the disaster phase comes, then this becomes important. Then orderly transitions from response to sustained recovery. That means you respond to a disaster if your preparedness is good in an orderly manner, and which ends in a sustained recovery process. Preparedness is based on a sound analysis of disaster risks and good linkages with early warning system. Early warning system I am going to discuss further is important, very, very important in disaster management. But one has to have a good idea about disaster risks and preparedness. It includes such activities as contingency planning, stockpiling of equipment, supplies, development of arrangements for coordination. If it is a big disaster which leads to evacuation, which is the big challenge and bigger challenge in a populous country like ours, public information and associated training and field exercises. Field exercise is a form of training. I would say another subset of training. These must be supported by formal institutional, legal and budgetary capacities. The related term readiness describes the ability to quickly and appropriately respond when required. Now, this is what is all part of preparedness. And a preparedness plan establishes arrangements in advance to enable timely, effective, and appropriate responses to specific potential hazardous events. That means potential disaster. Now, what is important is the preparedness is matching with the disaster forecast. Like if somebody gets alert, early warning, the final disaster or final emergency may not be exactly the same because there are some uncertainties involved in this. But the preparedness has to match it at a particular time. Disaster preparedness refers to measures taken to prepare for and reduce the effects of disasters. All right, so prepare for and reduce the effects of disasters. That is to predict and wherever possible prevent them. So the first part of disaster preparedness is as far as possible prevent the disasters. Now, one cannot take the structures away from the disaster prone or disaster affected or the potentially disaster threatened area. But the lives can be saved just by simply moving them away to a safer place. Mitigate the impact on vulnerable populations by giving simple warning. Give a simple warning, people should stay in house for let us say 1 hour or 2 hours, then can save them from a big loss. Simple warning not to venture out in let us say jungle areas or ground areas, depending upon type of disasters that can save life, and the vulnerability can be reduced substantially. And the consequences will be drastically reduced if we are prepared to assess and warn the community in advance. Disaster preparedness is best viewed from a broad perspective and is more appropriately conceived. It is conceived of as a target goal rather than a specialized program. So disaster management is part of, let us say, community activities or local activities. It is not just a program, a special program. It's like normal thing happening. Disaster preparedness is a continuous and integrated process resulting from a wide range of activities and resources. Disaster preparedness encompasses the following objectives. They are, they are the regular testing of the warning system. Regular testing of warning system. Then education and training. Actual disaster management is a field subject when it comes to response. So very, very important that the community is sensitized or upgraded in a trend, or maybe a section of the community is trained and they are like regularly subjected to exposure of training and upgradation depending upon technology. Training of first aid and emergency response teams, very important, not depending upon the responders to come, not depending upon the trained medics to come. This first aid is one thing which can be given by the community or the immediate neighbors. Establishment of emergency response policies, standards, organizational arrangements, and operational plan to be followed after disaster. Very important is one can have everything, resources, infrastructure, people, everything. If it is not properly coordinated, if it is not made in an operational level, the system will not work. The resources will go waste, not utilized. Let us say the equipment is there somewhere, cannot be used because of poor coordination and because of poor operational plans. So operational plans and field preparation, field training, field exercises, they are very important in disaster preparedness. Strengthening community-based disaster preparedness. If somebody asks me personally, what is the most important element? What is the most important aspect of disaster management? Preparedness, prevention, mitigation, relief, everything I did. My personal preference is it is a community. It is a community if they are trained, they know their resources, they know their strength, they know their weaknesses. That is the most important part of every stage of disaster management. This can be done through a lot of national level bodies. Say, for example, we have civil defense, we have operating people in the police, we have people who are specialized in emergency management, and of course, the disaster response forces. This could include educating, preparing and supporting local populations and communities in their everyday efforts to reduce risk and prepare their own local response mechanisms. Now, the information about management of disaster in local area is best done by the people who live there, the local community, and address disaster emergency situation. Developing activities that are useful for both addressing everyday risk. Now, everyday risk may look a little exaggerated, but that is there in many places. And communities face and for responding to disaster situation, for example, health, first aid, or social welfare. I don't want to give an example like in many areas, snake bite cases are high. In many areas, lightning cases are high. In some areas, drowning is there. So these are like local emergencies. We may not be able to categorize them as disaster. They're like local emergency, but local community can rise and handle these things. Disaster preparedness measures. Disaster preparedness is a broad concept. It is a very, very broad concept because if I tell vaguely, it is like there is no end of preparation. It is like you prepare for the exam. You prepare till exams. And when the exam starts, then we can say preparation is over. So I would say disaster management is similar. Based on the data, based on the resources, based on the, let us say, policy priorities, based on the funding, we make preparations. Training, field exercises, very much aided. Disaster preparedness is a broad concept that describes a set of measures that minimizes, never zero, like I would say acceptable risk or residual risk that we discussed yesterday, of a hazard including loss of life, property, and disruption of livelihood. Disaster preparedness is achieved partially through readiness measures that expedite emergency response, rehabilitation and recovery, and result in rapid, timely, and targeted assistance. It is also achieved through community-based approaches. Okay, I've already given my importance, my priorities, that community has a very, very big role in disaster management and activities that build the capacities of people and communities to cope with the minimize the effects of a disaster on their lives. A comprehensive disaster preparedness strategy would therefore include the elements. These elements you can see is HRVCA, Hazard, Risk, Vulnerability, Capacity Assessment, Response, Planning. Everything has to be understood and prepared. Coordination. Coordination, the word looks so friendly, so simple, but it's a big challenge in managing a disaster, particularly a large disaster. Information management is, I would say, the backbone of disaster management. If information is available, they're shared in form of communication, in form of warning, in form of instructions, command, control, everywhere it is important. Then early warning. Early warning importance, one can very easily appreciate that different type of disasters, some of them are predicted, some of them are non-predictable because of the technological limitations, and some of the disasters, some of the emergencies, they require early warning, maybe in minutes. Some of them you can manage in hours and maybe days. Some of them can take longer time, like weeks and months. In case of CBRN, chemical disasters require warning in minutes to save the life or to save the health. Biological, the whole world has now gone through a big pandemic. It can be, the warning can take weeks and months to come. It percolates down to the affected people and time for its management. Radiological, it can take hours or in some cases longer hours. And nuclear, there is a lot of safety protocols available. It can take days, weeks, and sometimes longer period for preparation or for relief measures. Mobilization of resource depending upon the type of disaster or potential disaster, community participation and participation appraisal. Hazard, risk, vulnerability, and capacity assessment, as we have just seen earlier, that this is part of the disaster management measures. Okay, it is here. One has to know these are the important aspects of disaster, hazard, risk, vulnerability, and capacity assessment. And in capacity, we have got capacity and coping capacity. It enables local priorities to be identified and appropriate action taken to reduce disaster risk and assist in the design and development of programs that are mutually supportive and responsive to the needs of the people most closely concerned. Now, disaster risk, vulnerability, and capacity assessment is concerned with collecting, analyzing, and systemizing information on a given community's vulnerability to hazard in a structured and meaningful way. Now, structured and meaningful is obvious. This information is then used to diagnose the key risks and existing capacities. The aim of hazard, risk, vulnerability, capacity assessment are to assess the risk and hazard, involve communities, local authorities, draw up action plans, identify risk reduction activities. Now, all these lead to how to reduce the risk, how to minimize the risk, how to bring it to the acceptable level or residual level. Now, let us see what is response. If there is a disaster, warning, if there's a potential disaster, or let us say a disaster reaches, it takes place as per early warning prediction or maybe not predicted. The response is to save the life, properties, and environment. These are the three priorities in any disaster management. The response is taken as directly before, during, or immediately after disaster in order to save life, health, and impacts and ensure public safety and meet the basic subsistence needs of the people affected. This is the, let us say, the motto. This is the objective of response. The disaster response is predominantly focused on immediate and short-term needs. The target is clear. We respond for immediate requirement to save the affected public or area from disaster damages, which can have a short-term needs and immediate need. Let us say what happens after 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years. They do not come under the disaster response preparedness. These are done as and when situations come and as and when government prioritizes and takes action for continuing the relief or continuing supporting the disaster prone or disaster affect public community area. And effective, efficient, and timely response relies on disaster risk informed preparedness. Measures including the development of the response capacities of the individuals, communities, organizations, and countries. And now it moves like this. If the disaster has affected a few individuals, or communities, or organizations, or countries, or sometimes a big pandemic that whole world is affected, it depends upon them. But the disaster response is mainly to take care of immediate and short-term needs. Preparedness planning, the concept of preparedness planning is very important for those involved in disaster management. Now, we have seen the word preparedness. Now, the preparedness also requires a plan. Planning is there everywhere. Now, how do you do coordination planning, preparedness planning, response planning? Is like management of this much portion. Preparedness planning is very important for those involved in disaster management during an actual emergency or during a disaster. Quick and effective action is required. So this is very well easily understood. Any disaster management requires quick. The important thing is quick. See, on the community side, they should wait for the response, things to happen, things to improve. On the responder side or on the management side, it should be done very, very quick. If the person expects somebody to reach in 10 minutes, should happen. If they expect somebody to reach in 1 hour, that should happen. That is the preparedness. This action depends on having made an implemented preparedness plan. If appropriate action is not taken or if the response is delayed, lives may be needlessly lost. Now, why this needlessly? Because the preparedness has not been adequate. That means everything is available. Instead of reaching in 1 hour, the team reaches in 2 hours. So many lives lost. Okay, so that is the importance of timely response. If a preliminary plan, even though the details of a disaster remain uncertain, one can identify emergency shelter sites. Now, this is applicable in case of big disasters. where evacuation is involved. The people are like dislocated. They have to be moved from one area to another area. But in parallel, those things can be listed. Now, any place, shelters. The big public areas are normally shelters. In a town or in a place where evacuation is done because of threatening potential disaster, cyclone, tornadoes, or whatever like this, the big building, big hospitals, big schools, public areas, halls, they are the first areas which are normally earmarked for shifting the community, for sheltering the community. What are the needs in order to implement? What all are needed to order to implement? Okay, for disaster preparedness, disaster response, what all things are required? We require a good policy, plan, coordination, required gadgets, instruments, equipment. Now in CBRN, we require a lot of instruments. Then maintenance of these things in place and the agencies involved. That means trained agencies involved. Now policy means to prioritize the disaster preparation and response. I will also say that some people use the word political will. Political will to divert or to prioritize disaster preparedness, keep your resources locked up for disaster preparedness, disaster response. So this is part of the policy. And if it is there, the policy is there and the political will is there, rest of the things follow and the results are excellent. Stakeholders should collaborate and plan a response to anticipated emergencies. Emergencies should be read as both emergencies and disasters, including evacuation rules. Evacuation is a big challenge. It is a big challenge, a big issue everywhere because here the responders have to have an important role to play, but a very big role is the behavior or the response, the cooperation of community effect. If they cooperate, they listen to the responders, evacuation can be done in more orderly manner. Then the rules and responsibilities are defined. Then the planning details are always known to the community and it is communicated to them. It is shared with all the shared and communicated. Conduct training and active disasters. As I said, disaster management is a field work. Ultimately, it boils down to field. How people behave, how responders handle. Including after debriefs, including after action debriefs after disaster with stakeholders to prepare for anticipated emergencies. This is part of the planning. Suppose a disaster has taken place, how to debrief the people and the management and the disaster management community with stakeholders with anticipated emergencies. So conduct training and active drills. The training should include these factors, these issues, these aspects. Coordination is important. Coordination between all agencies. Okay. So let us say coordination between transportation, evacuation, shelters, state authorities, district authorities, all these people who are part of the emergency response, emergency planning, it has to be coordinated very nicely. People have to, actually, there is a separate guideline in this that is called Incident Response System. National Disaster Management Authorities have brought incident response system, the follow-up, the response, the preparedness, everything by various agencies have to be done according to the incident response system. I believe HBNI is going to have a detailed talk on incident response system by an expert. The program is being worked out and once it is scheduled, you will all know. So there is a guideline available. It is available online. I will just show you the book. This is the book which is on incident response system, and you can see it online. In the reference section, we will give the details, and this will be discussed. This will be covered in one of the sessions by an expert. All right. The coordination we have discussed briefly. Responding to emergencies requiring collaboration with wide range of partners. The wide range of partners may not be the same partners all the time. Let us say in case of CBRN, CBRN requires coordination with the nodal agencies, nodal departments, which are specialized, scientifically specialized for that particular, let us say for chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. There is one nodal department for chemical, one for biological, one for radiological, nuclear. This will be discussed in time to come. But when it comes to preparedness, everybody has to be kept poised. Everybody has to be kept better, because these things can happen anytime. So it requires collaboration with wide range of partners that may include government sector, private sector, and NGOs, so communities. I mean, a lot of people come into picture. Now, the equipment which is required in part of the disaster planning are a lot of equipment. They are for emergency operation center. In IRS, we will know what is emergency operation center. Communication between so many agencies. Traffic control equipment become very important close to the disaster area, and more during transportation of emergency responders, affected community, or affected, let us say, patients to be taken to hospitals, various areas. So these are the various equipment required, and maintenance, all the equipment, all the instruments have to be kept in working condition. I will tell you some very small looking but funny situation. Many of the instruments used in CBRN, are battery operated. Now, these battery operated instruments, they require very small care. The batteries have to be kept in working condition. Now, I have also experienced in many places, the instrument is perfect, but the battery is not available. That becomes a big handicap for the responders. So, these, whatever may be the best thing, if it is not maintained well, it can lead to a situation which one can regret. So, best thing is keep maintenance in order. So, this is done more often checking, more often training, more often field checking. Information technology has come, which has greatly helped in the management of disasters. That is in form of communication, location, prediction, and a lot many things. Then communication satellites, it tells the live location, communicates, remote sensing equipment instruments are there, which can also give assessment of the disaster, I would say how serious is the seriousness of the disaster. So information technology is applied everywhere, and everybody has got big instrument called mobile. That is a miracle. The important thing, it has to be kept in working condition. There should be more emphasis on development of new technologies. Yesterday we discussed that the disaster management plan, everything is dynamic. Nothing is stationary. More because the disaster pattern changes. Also because the technology changes. So the way of communicating, the way of assessing, responding is very simple. Erection of temporary shelters. The tent technology has become so good nowadays that in a very short time, in minutes, a big tent which can accommodate 200, 300 people can be established, can be erected by community. It does not require big expert advice, expert involvement. So technology has to be always integrated. The information and communication technologies can be summed up in 4 principles: multi-hazard, multi-technology, multi-phase, and multi-stakeholders. Means This technology can be utilized or it can be sprayed by, by the agencies in case of multi-hazard situation, multi-technology situation, multi-phase situation, and multi-stakeholder situation. So these things have come in different places yesterday during discussion. So I leave it here. So we take a break as usual, maybe 5-7 minutes. Then we are back and we'll continue. So see you after break. ये जो ब्रेक वाला है ना, स्टार्ट. So welcome back. I hope you're all fresh for the second part of today's session. So we have discussed preparedness, the requirement, the various equipment, maintenance, and things like that. Now we move further. Let us discuss early warning. Now, as we have said, discussed yesterday, risk is nothing but it is possibility of happening a bad thing. That is applicable in disaster management. But if time to mobilize the resources for evacuation or for whatever remedial actions are to be taken depending upon type of disaster. Early warning, early action. The concept of early warning, early action encompasses the provision of useful and timely information which empowers people to take action. Well, empower means it facilitates. It facilitates people to take action designed for to mitigate impacts of hazards. Very simple. If there is a disaster, the hazard which is likely to come to a place, strike a place, and the person moves away for that period, maybe for 1 hour, maybe for 2 hours. If it is cyclone, maybe 6 hours. If it is flooding, maybe till the water is drained, 24 hours, 48 hours, the hazard is over. You go back, clean your area, normalize your area, life is back. But the important thing is knowing in advance. Owing to the advances in science and technology, allowing access to data ranging from global satellite images to community observations, we are well equipped. We means all the disaster measures or the government and connected community were well equipped to produce weather and climate warning. That means a lot of technology expertise has come, which tells sufficiently in advance, quite in advance, about weather warning, the the hazards uh, because of cyclone, high winds, sandstorms, uh, tornadoes, flooding. All these are predictable with sufficient advance in time, and I would say reasonably good accuracy nowadays. Though the weather forecast at different time scales, city authorities through the weather forecast, the city authorities and humanitarian actors are able to assess the probability of upcoming hazards and trigger early response before the hazards strike or before the hazards unfold. Early warning, early action is thus used as a catch-all phrase to link an early warning system with appropriate action in response to a warning. Community used synonyms include anticipatory action and forecast based action. What do early and warning mean? The definition of what constitutes early is relative. I think this is very easily understood. What is early for some community? Maybe 24 hours because of technology and because they are prepared. For some community, it could be 1 hour. So this is relative. And with the technology changes, with the adoption of good technologies in disaster management system, it is it is becoming more and more accurate, and has become more, it gives you longer margin time. This is used to refer to any time before the materialization of a shock, as both early warning and early action happen prior to the onset of forecasted hazards. Early action means if it is possible to evacuate the area from the threatening disaster, that is like early action. Early warning, all the committee people are told they are ready to cooperate and to listen and follow the instructions. Warnings refer to information about the monitored hazard whose threshold has to be crossed according to predetermined observation protocols. There are already set do's and don'ts. There are already set threshold. Accordingly, things are decided because last minute decision should be kept to minimum in any SOPs or any protocols. I request all of you to use this word to ponder on this, to think about it, lead time. Now, lead time is, let me read continuous. The concept of lead time refers to the time between a forecast and or warning of a shock and when the shock occurs. The concept of lead time refers to the time between forecast and the warning of a shock. That means if as per the information generated, data generated as per technology, if it is possible to know how a weather related cyclone, flood, tornadoes are moving in direction with whatever threatening level, like speed of the wind, center of the, or let us say location of the movement or the movement speed. If this can be predicted or this can be known sufficiently in time, when it is going to reach the population area or when it is going to reach to the community, that much is the lead time in case of disaster prediction. But there is another word, and that is lead time required for type of disaster response. Because it is more important in CBRN in case of chemical hazards, chemical emergencies, the lead time has to be very, very less. That means the lead time for response, the responders have to reach very fast and start action because the chemicals have the potential to greatly affect, especially if it is in a closed area or it is a high intensity or a strong chemical. At least the lead time should help in at least moving the people out of that area in safe directions as early as possible. That is good enough as a first step. But in the lead time for prediction of a disaster or a hazard reaching to a community, as things happen, certain things are predictable and certain things depend upon the simulation accuracy and the behavior of the movement of the hazard. So this is like uncertainty. Uncertainty is the extent, the time of the disaster, the extent, time of emergency may change. And a simple principle followed or to be followed is it is good to be conservative in this approach. If somebody expects the disaster or the disaster or hazard strikes a particular area in let us say 10 hours, safe thing will be to tell the community to be ready in 8 hours. I mean, some margin depending upon the situation, depending upon, but the first principle of any disaster management or disaster prone area for the community is be in your proper senses all the time. Means do not panic. So the importance of lead time in prediction and importance of lead time in response. We have discussed, and it is highly localized and type of disaster prone. There is nothing like universal lead time for everything. An early warning system, EWS, has four core concepts: risk knowledge, monitoring and warning. That means what is the risk? One should know. It should be monitored. That means how it is moving, how it is intensifying, or how it is weakening should be monitored, and the warning should be available. Then the community's response or the responders' response capacity and dissemination and community communication. Now, this everything has to be shared with the affected community in a, let us say, a mature, filtered manner, which leads to, which does not lead to any panic effect. So, in the risk knowledge, systematic collection of risk information, including hazard, identification, and risk, vulnerability, and capacity assessment. Now, these are things under risk knowledge. Systematic collection of all information related to risk, hazard, vulnerability, and capacity. Monitoring and warning, that means when there is a risk or when there is a hazard or a threatening disaster, that is monitored continuously and the warning is generated. This is detection of the risk, analysis, hazard forecasting, including observation. Measurement is like assessment and prediction. And then dissemination and communication and the response capability of the community. Beyond early implementation, the objective of early action. The early action also differs from traditional humanitarian action. Early actions are designed to mitigate impacts preemptively to strengthen resilience instead of responding to manifested emergency. The first component of early warning. These are the four components of early warning. The first component of early warning system is risk knowledge, which includes producing risk information through collecting and assessing data on vulnerability, exposure, capacity, and hazards. Yesterday we have discussed when you go for risk knowledge, risk assessment, these are the various aspects which have to be considered. The second is monitoring and warning. Third is dissemination and communication of the message through various stages. The fourth is response capabilities. When effective early warning systems help lives, livelihoods, and infrastructure, they are therefore key to disaster risk reduction. Well, it is obvious if these things are followed and depending upon its uncertainty and depending upon its accuracy, it is going to greatly reduce the disaster. So this is a very good advantage of disaster risk reduction and support long-term sustainable development. If the disaster is less and if it is mechanism was working, it becomes sustainable for long-term development. Synergies of integrated emergency warning system is core elements of establishing community emergency early warning system. That means core early warning system. Communities conduct risk analysis, set up monitoring practices, and develop response plans. When National Emergency Warning System disseminates warnings. They triangulate data with the monitoring of their own indicators and deploy early action. Now, I would say, in so many words, the certain agencies with disaster risk reduction mandates, such as one is the Red Cross. They support in the development, deployment, and maintenance of the community's early warning. So early warning system is very, very important in disaster management. We have already discussed. But there are some international mechanisms. There are so many international institutes who are dedicated to some important aspects of disaster, let us say help during disaster to the community and to the various agencies which are involved in this. Now, common alerting protocol. The common alerting protocol is a standard format for warnings and emergency alerts. All right, we have anticipatory action, we have response, we have recovery. In the anticipatory action, we have early warning, we have hazard forecast. The time between early warning and the onset of hazard, they come under anticipatory action. Now, the common alerting protocol is a standard format for warnings and emergency alerts. When alerting the public, the information must reach vast number of people. In disaster management, there is a term used which we'll use it maybe in the next sessions. Last mile action. See, in economic, there is a word in supply chain, last mile delivery, last mile connectivity in communication. Similarly, in disaster management, also use the word golden hour and the last mile action. Last mile action is the place where the system, the support, the communication, the relief has to reach to the affected people, affected at the affected location. Now, this is very important because till the time it reaches to the disaster affected or potential disaster affected area, things are comfortable. Things are as per design. But once it reaches to the disaster affected area, it so happens that things change drastically. Your transportation mechanism will not work. Distribution mechanism will not work. Communication system will face a bigger challenge. Reaching to the point, reaching to the person, let us say simple water, simple medicines will become a big challenge. And once this reaches, it gives a lot of comfort and saves a lot of life in this process. So the last mile connectivity in the common alerting protocol, which is why it requires multiple dissemination methodologies. It is key that all recipients access the same key warning facts so that the communication is clear. It should not happen that our communication gives a very vague idea and the affected community are not able to make out or they get a wrong meaning and reach to a wrong place. According to common alerting protocol, communication must include the 9 elements. You can say it is like a checklist or it is like a data sheet. The common alerting protocol should have name of the sender, name sent, identification, status, message type, scope, category, message template, very important, and the type of priority. These are 9 elements of common alerting protocol. All right. In disaster management, when the disasters reach, or let us say the threatening disaster is predicted and early warning mechanism is activated, the resource mobilization, and I would say that timely, effectively, appropriate resource mobilization has to start in a most efficient manner. This is like an exam time. This is like a testing time for all the people who work in the field of disaster management. The effective implementation of this policy will require adequate resources. Now, why adequate? Because different type of disasters, different locations, different communities require different level of disaster support or disaster relief equipment. These are financial, human, equipment and infrastructure. It has also been noted that resource procurement is slow during emergencies. I think it's very obvious because if there is emergency, things urgently required or difficult to get because sometimes the production is affected or it has to be transported from a long distance area. So management becomes difficult. The same medicine which you get easily becomes out of stock because of the sudden surge in the application. So these things have to be planned in the most optimum manner in the beginning. The response mobilization process, this starts locally and it progresses outwards to district, state, and if requires national level. And there are occasions when the resources are pulled from outside the country also. So this has to be done, and if the protocol is available, if the mechanism is available, infrastructure is available, this can be done very fast nowadays. Budget for disaster management. Let us say finance for disaster management. We all experience whenever we have come across preparation for disaster management, training, resources, procurement and stocking of some basic infrastructure, instrument, equipment. The one question which is asked by everybody, I have seen in government sectors, private sectors, facilities, factories, airports, seaports, many places. Where from to get this budget and where from to get manpower? All right, so we will discuss in another 5 minutes, in this coming 5 minutes, how to manage budget. And see, one thing we all know, the disaster do a devastating effect on the economy. So today, if you spend 1 rupee, today you spend 5 rupees, can save hundreds of rupees in terms of saving from losses owing to disaster. But one has to keep it in mind that today sparing 5 rupees may be painful because people say it does not give any profit. Because some people think it is a non-productive expenditure, it is a non-productive budget. But the experience shows that spending resources, spending finance optimally for emergency, for disaster management, it pays much better and maybe much faster. It does not take a long time. All right. So in our country, in India, there are funds at state level and national level. The State Disaster Response Fund is managed by states, and National Disaster Management Fund is its short call is NDRF. This is made available at the national level. And there's a need to be harmonized for effective management and use in case of a disaster. This policy therefore recommends the establishment of a common basket, I would say just common disaster management fund with contributors from all stakeholders, including government, development partners, United Nations agencies. Let us say for the timing, I don't discuss this. Even private sectors which are involved, because if there's a big disaster, they are also badly affected, their production is affected, and the individual contributors. The fund should have opening from everywhere who are in the field of disaster management or who give priorities in disaster management. Let us say in their individual capacity also. This policy proposes the establishment of a national disaster management trust. Now, these things are going on, but otherwise, these are the two funds which are already available. Now, state disaster management fund, the details are, it is constituted under section 48A1 of the Disaster Management Act 2000. See, we have introductory idea about DM Act 2005. Under section 48(1), I will try to cover on Monday some important points of Disaster Management Act. There is a primary fund available with the state governments for responses to notified disasters. The central government contributes 75% of disaster management fund at state level of general category and states and UTs, and 90% for the special category status. Some states and UTs, once they become a special category, they are entitled for 90% of the disaster management fund from the central government, and other states and UTs are entitled for 75%. From the bill of balance, 25%, 10% of their share. Their disaster management covered, and it says which are the special duties: Northeast states, Sikkim, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir. But the condition is the money has to be spent only expenditure for providing immediate relief to the victims. This money is let us say, a locked up money for disaster only. Now, disasters covered under SDRF. These are the disasters covered. They are listed: cyclone, drought, earthquake, fire, flood, tsunami, hailstorm, landslide, avalanche, cloudburst, pest attack. There have been cases of pest attack. I think in 2018 or 19, there was a severe pest attack cases in some part of the India. I think north west side. For a frost and cold waves. Human and non-human resources in disaster management response. What are the resources? What are the human resources? What are the non-human resources? And we are going to discuss this. Whereas within the country, plenty of human and non-human resources are in place. Effective inventory and coordination for disaster management in emergencies are inadequate. Now, why I say inadequate is because I would say it is not matching the residual risk criteria. That means whenever there is a disaster, if we are not able to avoid, we are not able to prevent, we should be able to mitigate to a level which is like acceptable risk. But we need to do more. The country needs to do more to bring the human and non-human resources to a level. That can be done by several methods. In order to increase the capacity to respond quickly to emergency and disasters, inventories of both human and non-human resources will be kept, and they are dispersed at various levels, including local, district, and national level. Particularly in case of CBRN emergencies, in case of CBRN emergency response preparedness, the system has to be kept poised. Adequate detection instruments and PPEs. PPEs are personal protection equipment. It is like in form of a dress. To manage CBRN incidents should be kept ready at all levels. This will be further discussed, but enough to say because CBRN largely depends, because of its invisible nature, it largely depends, or I would say fully depends on instruments and instruments detection and measurement capabilities. So very important to keep these instruments as a part of resources. Next, we have people, we have community, even they are in interested communities, but if they are trained for handling a situation, managing an instrument, communicating the instrument readings, deciphering the level of threat because of particular instrument reading levels. More important is CBRN. This cannot be done. This is of no use if the community is not trained. Instrument can be kept lying. Nobody knows how to use the instrument. Even simple instruments, everybody, I would say, maybe 80-90% of the population, they know how to operate, how to use mobile phones. But there are very simple digital reading instruments available for CBR and SAR type of situations. It is important to keep these instruments poised, ready in so many places, in the strategic places, in all big cities and all towns, wherever risk is there, where some trained community, trained people can be, the familiar people or the instrument can be kept exposed to these people who can periodically use during exercise, they can be cross-checked. So the important part is training of these people at every level. That means trained responders, it goes without saying. But community and some local community support people, some young people, even some students, some faculty members from the schools and colleges can be kept trained. Now, different type of CBR and emergency events, including triaging, treatment, intensive intervention, should be imparted to the emergency responder. Now, this triaging will be discussed again, but right now it is sufficient to say that they are important part of first responders, not the trained responders. The first responders means community. Let us say we come to infrastructure. I am not very happy to use this word, but the infrastructure in this country, this is, I would say, I remove this word. The current infrastructure and centralization of some key infrastructure relevant for disaster management has slowed response. This was the earlier experience. The preparedness was well below the expectation or well below the requirement. Now things have greatly improved. There is no end of improvement, I would say, and no target. I mean, like safety is a journey, and it is similar. Preparedness also has to improve. So there is a need that we keep it prioritized and not just one side of the country or hub side of the country. Everywhere this has to be done. Everywhere people have to prioritize instead of saying it is not my responsibility, it is others' responsibility. Everybody is responsible for this, whether it is district, state, or national level or community. This aspect of community preparedness and community preparation, personally, I feel this is the key. This is key to every disaster at every stage, whether it is preparedness, whether it is mitigation, whether it is response, and I would say even relief. If the community is trained, if the community has got good capacity, or they are like, even I would say, a good morally competent people who do not panic. In disaster management, very important is do not panic. If the community is having that assurance that things can be managed, if the community themselves can manage, lot of disaster related damages to a good extent can be reduced. So Popular or community participation can be broadly understood as the active involvement of people. Active involvement of people. Community participation is being encouraged in many areas of development, including disaster management, but practical guidance remains relatively limited. In humanitarian circles, though the relevance of participation is more questionable, at least in some contexts. I would say it's very general, but to a good extent, community participation is increasing, and one one would one would always try for its improvement. And depending upon the type of disaster and community, some more handshaking is required between the agencies, the trained responders, and the local community. Community participation motivates people to work together where people feel a sense of being a part of the community. Now, community participation also leads to a process of people involvement in setting goals and preparing, implementing, and evaluating plans. Now, these are all very obvious things in case of any uh, community involvement. See, community also feels encouraged. They also feel very satisfied if the voice is heard in any community related activities, including disaster management. Now, these are the uh, listed importance. These are the listed advantages of community participation. First thing is they enable people to explain vulnerability and priorities. Then local knowledge and expertise is best available with the communities. Participatory work takes a multitask approach, well placed dealing for well placed for dealing with complexity of disasters because the community knows the local issues, community knows the local things. The process of working and achieving things together can strengthen communities. See, ultimately, what is the advantage of community living? They help each other when they are together, when they are together, and when their voice is heard, it strengthens the community, and a great factor in disaster risk reduction. Sustainable because they build on local capacity because the community knows their strength and weaknesses. They know their strength and weaknesses, so it becomes very easy. It becomes very practical to know uh, what is sustainable and what is not. Then the community participation in planning and implementing projects is like democratization in the society. That means it is not that somebody gives instruction, somebody follows. In the instruction, community is involved, community role is there, and they are part of the process. And in a democracy like ours, it goes very well. The approach is participatory approach may be more cost effective in the long run. It saves money because the community, because of their activities, their proper knowledge, it is always good to use the budget, to use the funds at the right place and minimize wastage. So it is, I'd say, more economical in the long run. Local people, local people can bring a wealth of resources, especially knowledge and skills. I think very easy to understand because they know the local small things. They have there are some craftsmen or the craftsmanship which are useful in disaster management, so they are useful. Working closely with local people can help professionals to gain a greater insight into the communities they seek to serve, enabling them to work more effectively and produce better results. Anyway, this is all listed. There can be some more points, or there, let us say some points can be split further. But nevertheless, the importance of community participation in disaster management, I would say, is very important, very high. So here we go. Thanks. And I have one more lecture on Monday. But let me share one very critical information that lot of details, lot of PPTs. I have taken help of Dr. Kunal Sharma, who will be starting his lecture once my term is over. I have also consulted Dr. Ghosh, S.K. Ghosh, who is presently working as a senior consultant, and I have consulted Dr. S. Mishra, who is course director on many issues, and whatever we have discussed is a combined effect of all these consultations. So thank you very much, and I welcome any questions, and you can write in the chat box. Chat box. I'll be able to see them and answer. So we have some time where these questions can be shared. Those people who are in the emergency or disaster management response team and who are there out of, I would say, a response uh, volunteers, all those people who are there for saving the lives, who are there for helping people to minimize the losses. You can count volunteers who try to help people in their uh, movement, in evacuation, psychological support, medical support, or emergency shifting, people who are physically disabled or physically in trouble. These are all humanitarian actors. So if you want some more details, I will get, but this is good enough as a part of today's discussion. All right. Now this is a question on how to calculate budget for disaster management for a financial year. I think a very challenging question, I should say, because budget in terms of finance, money, and budget in terms of manpower. In many places, both are very, very important. And a lot of old data is available, earlier data is available, and depending upon the total national GDP, depending upon total national budget and past experience, a portion of the money is kept. And this money, which is kept for the purpose, is shared among various states, and depending upon their disaster history, whatever has happened in the years, and depending upon their disaster response efficiencies in the past. The damage, the biggest example is our cyclone in Odisha coast. What was the problem? Let us say 20 years back, the same time of cyclone which comes afterwards, let us say every 3, 4 years, 5 years, the damages have come very, very less. I have explained yesterday that almost 20,000 crores worth of cyclone shelters have been built along the coast, Indian coastline. Now, this is the type of money which is spent by central government with the help of World Bank, but keeping like a cash money for the purpose of disaster management is a shared value between central and state. Though it is given in terms of proportion, you will all remember that during this COVID time, there was a policy that any life lost because of COVID against a medical certificate of COVID, they were given a compensation of 50,000 rupees. Now, this is a money which was recommended by National Disaster Management Authority on the, I would say, instructions of court. Now, this money was a shared money. Central government gave this money, but the other part of the money was shared with the state. So there is no fixed figure that I can tell you for every state, every financial year, but the past data plays a big role in this. But when it comes to preparedness, if it is already a decided recommendation, then for the preparedness also, center and state, they spend their resources as a pool. As I have said, 75% state government and 75% central government and 25% state government. So in that proportion is kept, and the rest of the things are like dynamic system, month to month and year to year discussions and negotiation. Thank you. So I think now I will be here on Monday again and try to cover some more areas. And anybody having a particular question can send a question to help desk addressed to me. I will try to see them during this Saturday, Sunday, and come back to Monday. And well, further lecturing will be there. Whatever is residual, whatever is the left out questions can be addressed then there also. So thank you very much. We close it for the day. Have a nice time.